Hey,
Hello.
hello, everybody. Welcome back. Okay, so I am delighted to see you here. Your name or your video, of course. It's lovely to have you here. Again, my name is Julika von Stackelberg with Cornell Cooperative Extension, and I am delighted to share this second episode of our Growing Resilience webinar series, Season 4, on a path towards regenerative resilience. And today we're going to dig in a little bit more about or on what we began discussing. So we're going to actually talk about building frameworks for collaboration and connecting with our neighbors as the next step in this way of building community resilience based on the issues that we have addressed in the last time. I will do a brief overview of those again, but just so you see, here is our calendar of events, so to speak. We talked about why do we discuss climate, public health, and community resilience all together in our last session, and the recording of that is available on our YouTube channel. I will send everybody who is registered for this the recordings, of course. Then today we're going to talk about, as mentioned, building frameworks for collaboration. And then, as you can see, the coming themes are continuing to build on these subjects. Just to mention one more time that Cornell Cooperative Extension in Orange County has lots and lots of wonderful programming to offer that I highly recommend everybody to check on the website for upcoming events. For, as you can see here, our dog program, but not only that, we have many other things going. And of course, coming up this summer, our county fair. And so mark your calendars for that, the last weekend in July in Otisville, New York. And you can find all of that information on our website as well. And also there are always ways to get involved as a volunteer. We have job opportunities or just as a program committee in one of our areas. So we're always delighted to partner with you in many ways, to include you. So in the spirit of building our own resiliency, I want to invite you all to join me again in taking a resilience pause and using the so-called skylight method. So from our last conversation, that is basically where you're looking down at yourself through something like a skylight, and you're looking inside of you to see and do kind of just a scan. How are you doing? What are you currently experiencing in your body, in your mind, and in your emotions? And before we take the next step, I want to just invite you for a moment to check in with you through this skylight method and with yourself, and just take a moment to notice what's going on. What are you experiencing? Okay. Thank you for joining me on this. There are some beautiful birds tweeting outside my window, and that just feels very summery to me. I love that feeling. So, and that also is part of what leads us to this next exercise that I want to do with you, which is called resourcing. So this has been, in across different, I think, mindfulness and sort of somatic practices. This is a common practice where we are looking for resources that provide us peace of mind, that give us support during difficult times, and that may give us hope. So what I want you to do is bring to mind a person or a resource. So that could be a place, a thing, a practice, anything that helps you get through difficult times when you experience them, and that gives you hope. So bring that to mind. I'm just going to let you conjure your memory, your resources until that comes up for you. Okay, and so as you bring that up, begin to fill out some of the details that are, making this resource for you work, that calm you and give you hope. So really think about, what sort of images do you have of that resource? What sounds might be associated with that? What other sensations come to mind? And when that resource becomes really alive for you, begin to notice what that does to your body, what happens within you. All right. And then I invite you to come back to the room. And I'm wondering if you are willing to share perhaps what you noticed within you that took place as you were conjuring this resource. And you can unmute yourself or turn your camera on, whatever feels comfortable to you. I'd love to hear from you.
My resource was Yankee Lake, a little lake up here in Sullivan County that I grew up on and spent many summers enjoying the sunshine and happy times, but also cried many tears in that lake. So it's been a place of happiness and a place of healing to me. So it was great to bring that resource back in front.
Beautiful. And can you share what you noticed happened within you when you remembered all of that?
I started belly breathing, just putting myself on the end of the dock where I've been to breathe, and I started doing it naturally.
Beautiful. It's so powerful, our imagination, that, we don't even need to be fully present and we can get sensations. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You.
Yeah, is anyone else who would like to share?
I was thinking about people who have supported me in times when I might have been nervous to take a step or do something, and the ways that they emotionally supported me and verbally supported me, as well as through small tokens of support that they've given physically.
Lovely. And did you notice anything inside of you?
Yeah, I feel like when I think of those things, like my chest feels more open and light, and I just feel like it says more calm.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I really, over and over, I discover how much my nervous system responds to these kinds of, resources or practices. And so I really want to invite you to continue to pay attention to that, because that is really where our power lies, where our agency can really have an impact on our entire nervous system and our ability to regulate ourselves. So thank you for sharing those. And yes, please always continue to practice. And then I also invite you to share those with others if you have an opportunity to bring this to a conversation with a colleague, a friend, family member, the cashier somewhere, wherever we have good conversations. Okay, thank you. So we're going to continue. Just to briefly review what we talked about, and the premise of this season is really the fact that community is medicine, right? And the fact that throughout human history, across the globe and in different cultures and contexts, when people and humans band together, they're able to solve very complex problems, and with that they're able to adapt and continue to evolve in their specific contexts. And so we really can do this together. And given the challenges that we are facing in terms of our social environments, our living environments, and also, on different scales, when we can build the types of communities that are providing the ways that our nervous system can regulate itself, just like we experienced, then we really can create that medicine together. And under the same premise, we also talked about the fact that if trauma can be passed down, then so can healing. And based on these types of understandings, or that understanding, is how we are going to focus this work in community building. And so we also talked about, so what we're wanting to talk about today is really how do we build protective factors through community engagement, because oftentimes we may have protective factors that are implemented through organizations or specific strategies and approaches that you all might already be using. I know that, at Cornell Cooperative Extension, our parenting programs, for example, are developed with a framework that builds protective factors for families. But what we are looking here to do is to stretch this even further and to look at ways that we can engage our community in doing that, in the process. And that is really this public health approach that we are applying in this context here that I'll come back to in a little bit. So what we want to do is really develop our communities or shift towards ways that we can be resilience enhancing, right? And so what that means is that we all hold a piece of that puzzle. We all can contribute in some ways, or, do something, adopt approaches, find ways to interact with each other that works. So when there's a robust sense of safety among members and stakeholders in general, that's when resilience can grow. So here are some of the basically traits that describe what a resilient community or resilience enhancing community looks like versus perhaps a community that is trauma oriented, where we're just problem solving as it happens, which we want to do and continue to do, but how do we in the process also enhance resilience? So that means another trait is that we have wide agreements on the definitions of well-being and resilience and the principles that guide decision-making. And so this means that there is some togetherness required, because this doesn't happen in a vacuum. And how we build that is what we're going to talk about today. Another trait is that folks are able to emotionally regulate themselves. So this means that we have an environment that supports our nervous system's ability to regulate and regenerate well-being through what you just experienced, building moments that allow us to do that. Being able to respond to stress with strategies that allow us to then re-regulate. Another trait is widespread agreement on acceptable behaviors and practices. So there's community agreements. And then that there are numerous partnerships and collaborations between groups and organizations. So, you know, we all come with different perspectives that are very valuable to this. So we want to make sure that we don't have, or that we have groups that are at a manageable size where we can contribute to this. And so how to develop those groups is what we'll be talking about as well today. There are rules and regulations that foster trust and safety. So how we make these agreements and adhere to those. Another trait, embrace and utilize criticism and concerns and to learn to improve. So this is not just about singing Kumbaya together, even though I have to agree that's a really nice thing to do. There is also opportunities to continue to learn and to improve and to be able to share, you know, constructive criticism. So clear commitment to social responsibility, equity, and social justice is also part of this, because we need to recognize that our larger systems are created on the lineage of thoughts and structures and policies that have been exclusive or developed and advanced for specific groups, and we want to make sure that that is not the case going forward. We need to openly acknowledge and mourn tragedy and loss. This is something that is also sometimes very challenging. And so learning how to do that requires spaces where we can be vulnerable, where we can also take a pause to allow for these processes to take place. Have a democratic decision-making and open-ended two-way communication. So this is really being able to accommodate different perspectives and views. And then a strong level of trust and empathy, compassion, and social support. So those are ways that we are able to contribute to the well-being of a larger group. And then constant search for and reduction of environmental impact. So we want to make sure that we also apply practices and approaches that are contributing to our, the well-being of our environment. So these are some of the traits. I'm sure there's more, but that's this is what comes from this resource that you can see there. With Susan Bloom and Bob Doppold. So they have kind of honed it down to this, but feel free to continue to add to these. The puzzle is going to become richer and richer as a result. So how do we build protective factors through active community engagement is a question you may be asking yourself. And so here you kind of see this analogy almost of an iceberg that also contributes our environmental experiences and what that looks like in under the earth, and so under the surface of the water and also on top. And so as we're looking to engage community, there's sort of a scale that we can look at, right? So we can say at the very top, the very least impactful and yet important, or it may be the very least and least important, but still it matters, a step and a contribution is individualized treatment. So this is sort of this community structure that I referred to before, where we are addressing individuals with treatments and with support, and we should continue to do that. But then when we go deeper, we take it to that, direct service. So how do we reach out to lots of individuals with our approaches? And those are trauma-informed approaches, resilience-building approaches, healing-centered approaches, right? So every time we sort of deepen that work. And then we begin to get underneath the surface. We get into the root system and we can come to the usually invisible impacts or structures that impact our well-being. So that's the systems change. That's always feels like a huge undertaking, but it's one that also can be broken down into smaller steps. So here, creating systems that use multi-systemic approaches to build population-level capacity for resilience to prevent and heal distresses and trauma, right? So that we are beginning to organize around these events and find ways that are allowing us to be responsive and that also can contribute to the healing process. So the resilience, meaning the bouncing back, and then the regenerative is the healing and regenerating that well-being. And then if we take that another step deeper, so to speak, with expanded mental models, because so much of how we reinforce our system really stems from our belief systems. So that means that we have to simultaneously work on expanding assumptions, beliefs, and the perceptions about the causes and solutions to mental health and psychosocial spiritual struggles. So this basically encompasses, all of the dimensions that describe our well-being. So we need to think about those and continue to evaluate or expand these kind of pieces. And so then we're able to focus of, this community initiatives on this public health approach. So that's how we integrate that to build that population level mental wellness and resilience and, have that greater impact. And so then obviously, I always love the analogy of trees in how we see then how, it can flourish and bear fruits. And so, the more we strengthen that root system, and that too has environmental impacts, of course. And so adopting a population level and public health approach to build protective factors, because catastrophes offer also opportunities for profound transformation. So when we experience struggles or difficulties, we also have this opportunity for transformation. Also, adversities can be sometimes the greatest input for learning and growth and change and transformation. And then, Bob Doppel said what the caterpillar calls the end of the world is what we call or may call a butterfly. So this is this metamorphosis that, we may be experiencing. And it is a struggle to come out of a cocoon. And it is very important in that, and I really want to stress that the environment needs to be conducive to a process that can take place. So in other words, sometimes we think about this alchemy, can just happen when you're just strong enough to, withstand all that pain or injustice, and you're going to come out, you'll be, invincible and so strong. But really, I'm not saying this lightly. What is very critical in this is that there is some sort of an environment that supports that process of transformation. Because, that's kind of, that's key. So that's why this approach in engaging the public is really powerful in doing that. So if we think about this, and this is going to the assumptions and beliefs, right? And I don't know if you've heard this, but given that we are facing so many challenges that seem to be unsurmountable to some degree, it sometimes becomes easier to imagine the end of the world than the ways that we might fix it. And so for our own sanity and our own way of maintaining and cultivating hope, it is very critical that we envision what alternative solutions would actually look like. So it's a practice that we can also incorporate, and where we really take that time to envision how would that be? What would my life look like in a system, for example, that is supportive of everyone's mental health and well-being, right? And so it's not that we sit there and say, well, it doesn't work because X, Y, and Z, and we'll come to some of the myths in a bit, but it's really important to practice this idea of allowing your imagination to kind of conjure those images and sensations that come along with that. So, that means looking at grassroots neighborhoods, organizations, civic organizations, youth education, climate, faith, spirituality, mental health. Think about community leaders coming together to create strategies that build population level mental health and resilience. What does that look like? And then think about or envision and imagine how every adult, adolescent, and young child learns simple, self-administratable, age and culturally appropriate tools like presencing, similar to what we just did, which is why, too, you hold so much opportunity in your hands by sharing some of the tools that you might be learning here. But I know, in fact, that many of you, if not all of you, have a whole toolbox that you can share from with others to support self-regulation. And then we're also supporting co-regulation. Every time you consciously regulate your own self, you are also offering an opportunity for co-regulation for someone else who comes in contact with you. And so that's really what builds these resilience skills. And then imagine, everyone learns very simple purposing or adversity-based growth. So that means that we can see purpose in the experiences that we have, that they teach us something. They learn us to grow. Help us learn and grow. So that resilience skills turn also towards climate change and other adversities. And so we can really use those as a transformational catalyst to find new meaning, purpose, courage, and hope in life, right? So that's how we make sense of the world and feel like there is a reason behind certain things. So as we look at how we look at this community engagement, we have to think about all of the relations that we have at every scale. And we don't have to think about that at every moment. And, sometimes I'm in a set of, my mindset allows me to think big, right? And to really grasp a big picture. But there are other times where I can't do that. I feel overwhelmed by some of the experiences or maybe my tasks or, just the workload that I might have. And so in that case, I might focus in more on the individual. And that's all okay. There is no right or wrong, but it's really thinking about each of these different levels and how the relations within those levels and then, of course, throughout these levels function. And so, sometimes I stare at this image a little bit longer and it starts to become alive, like these, what are holographic images, I think they're called, where something begins to, take life. And so what I'm trying to say is that these interact with each other and are nestled with one another. It's not necessarily as cut as you see there, but just to see the living kind of dynamic that comes from, how that all interplays with one another. So how do we use a public health approach? What does that mean? What does that look like, or why? And so one thing is that we know that, and I know that some of you here have, work really in this field. So I'm gonna also lean on your expertise in this because I know that you have a very good understanding, and I look forward to discussion in a little bit. But we know that positive change is more likely to occur when the people that are affected actively involved in the change process, right? So I know, for example, many of our programs at Cornell Cooperative Extension are really experiential, are designed to be experiential so that the participants in the programs can really have an experience that allows them to actively contribute and engage, but also to apply their own agency and determine into which direction they want to go, what helps you in a way, is, basically we're all our own experts. We all have a lot of knowledge that we can contribute to our own well-being. And so that's the kind of way of really making sure we are making room for that. And then also active participation by residents has the greatest chance of developing the ownership required to strengthen and sustain the protective factors needed to build population-level mental wellness and transformational resilience. So I think that describes pretty well what that looks like. And again, there is no single right way to coordinate and organize resilience groups, networks, and coalitions. There are so many different examples, and many of those can serve to help inspire us. And so here are some things that, ways to activate change, which also means that we are looking at systems approaches that basically we change the systems. That's what we're trying. And so here again, you can see that there's the greatest level leverage points and interventions for shifting from a trauma organized, that's this kind of community that is reactive, tends more to the individual, to a human resilience enhancing community. And so there are different leverage points. Again, we have this, from the greatest to the least strengths, but there's a range of things that we can do. So one leverage point may be to change the mindset that shape the way the community typically views and responds to issues, right? So this is talking about that mindset. Rearrange the way we're planning and making decisions in our community and how that's structured. Alter the vision, goals, and decision-making criteria of the community. Restructure the rules of engagement among groups within community. Shift the flow of information within the community, correct the feedback loops of the community. So always making sure we have ways for voices to be heard, for feedback to be solicited, and for needs to be continually assessed. And then adjust the policies and regulation of the community. So I know for sure that each one of us has the ability to leverage any one of these points. And so even that may not look like I can change my entire system, for example, the Cornell Cooperative Extension system, but there's something I can do within my team. There's something I can do within my program area, my department, whatever you see how that works, or in your community, how in my neighborhood, in my street. Any of those, apply on all of them. And then there are different interventions that you can see listed here. We can educate people about the benefits, and that helps to basically change the mindset. We can organize deep, wide, and inclusive human resilience committees. And so that's what we're going to get into a little bit. We can create committees that clarify some of this vision, and where we're looking to finding steps and strategies to achieve that. We can use every means of communication to share the vision, to develop guided principles and strategies, and to also make sure that we role model and always, again, include. We constantly want to evaluate and then, of course, embed new policies in our operating systems. And that is how systems change can basically shift. I see your hand, Amanda, go ahead.
Sorry, I just have a quick question because in this work, it's always been push, push, push towards the policy change because that's the gold standard. So when I look at your arrow on the left there of, the least leverage for change is the policy, am I reading that correctly or is?
Yeah, so really, I mean, so yes, we want to change policy, but if the policy is not informed by the mind shift, then we run the risk of restructuring. So we may be putting on a new, facade in some ways, but we really want to integrate these kinds of shifts that take place. I think that, what we're looking at is really a transformational approach in some ways. And so that includes our own transformation and how we make that show up again in our policies.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, like I say, I'm just always so used to seeing, you do all that legwork and the gold standard is making a policy change, but this is kind of the reverse of saying, no, you have to well, I guess it's the same, but it's valuing things differently, that the transformation change, that the real change of mindsets and planning and vision and goals is really far more of a determining factor than just the policy itself, which
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say there's still, of course, interplay, right? So, there's that may be a good start, to look at policy. And I guess the other thing too is, then as you are going through this process, are you going to determine that policy is a static thing, or is it something that you may want to review as part of an ongoing basis to ensure that needs are met? And yeah, so for sure. Thank you. That's a good question though. Yeah. Okay, so so if we're thinking about some of these changes, right? So here's the wheel of change that is looking at the systems approach and how that can work. And again, there is a back and forth between all of those different aspects. So if at the center is that we want transformational resilience in our communities, which means it's an ongoing ability to regenerate well-being to some extent, then there are these spokes that kind of contribute to that. So we want to alter the dominant mindset. That's, one of the aspects. We want to rearrange the parts of some of the system. We want to change the community's purpose, perhaps. Restructure rules and engagement, shift the flow of information, correct the feedback mechanisms, and adjust the parameters. So basically, that would be a start more at a policy level, for example, where you are looking at these spokes or these pieces that keep the system rolling. And then, work the way to these mind shifts. And then I guess this eventually has to be reworked or addressed. And so how do we do this, right? So there's different ways, of course, but here's a suggestion of some steps that we can take. So the first thing is that we want to make sure we clarify what we want to achieve. So you can think about that for yourself individually. You can think about that for your team or your organization, depending on where you are at. And then think about why is it that you want to do that? And then develop basically a short elevator speech that explains it. So, you want to have a sentence or two that, or maybe three, that explain what it is that you are looking to achieve. And it's helpful to put that down. I've had so many different elevator speeches, and that doesn't mean that they go out of business, so to speak, but it's really that there's an evolution that goes along with that and a time and place. But being able to articulate these pieces is really important. And so then the second step would be to share your elevator speech, with 2 to 5 other people. It could be colleagues, it could be a small team that you're organizing, a planning committee, or it could be, in your any type of organization or group that is organized, you could think about ways to, share about your vision and what that looks like. Then get agreement on the initial mission and vision of your initiative once you have decided what that is, whether that is that you want to actually make a big change in an organization, or it may be that you want to change something on a smaller level within, a parent group that you're part of. Then identify other key leaders and share your elevator speech, mission, vision, and expand your group or team to 5 to 12 people and organizations. So here, and I'm reiterating that, this is sort of a way of organizing in general, but we are here to talk about ways that we can build community resilience. So that would be your subject or the vision that you have in that sense. And then continue to further clarify your vision and your mission and keep expanding by focusing also on diversity, right? So what, remember the puzzle pieces, what puzzle pieces are missing? Is the picture, really dimensional, or are you getting like a one color picture that looks all the same? So you want to make sure you're getting involved with different voices, different experiences, and so forth in order to really address the ability to build resilient communities. And so what you may also want to do is think about who you can think about who you want to talk about to adopt a public health approach to build that resilience, right? So I'm going to give you a moment to just think about 1 to 3 people who you can think about, individuals, that is. And there may be some overlap here. If you're looking at the slide, then you would also list 1 to 3 folks who are in the grassroots, maybe in the grassroots organizations, maybe in your neighborhood, other civic leaders you want to talk to. You can think about your elected officials. And then also in the private and public sectors, leaders who you think you can talk to. Think about schools, representatives, school board members. We just had a school board elections. And I'm just going to give you a moment to think about that. And to those who are listening to the recording, you also take your time to jot down a few names. Okay, so I'm going to leave it here, but we will come back to this. And one thing that we want to do in the process is that we want to demystify some of the cultural myths that we have that may be blocking the ideas when we are trying to bring these, this vision and mission that we have through our elevator speech to these, let's say, 6 to 9 people that we have now listed, right? So they are often deep-seated and often unspoken, socially constructed assumptions and beliefs about how the world works and how it's shaped. And basically that oftentimes makes us have assumptions about how we deal with changes and adversities in general. And so I'm stressing here that these are socially constructed because they're not necessarily rooted in evidence. And so what that happens is that then we have stories that basically, vilify or elevate specific people and groups that create winners and losers and that create good and bad. And so we end up with stories that become really difficult sometimes to overcome. So, oftentimes, for example, this idea of it's a dog eats dog world, right? There is no evidence, despite the fact that we may see a lot of unrest in the world. There's no evidence that humans are inherently made to, just go after each other. And so therefore, the best way to respond to this is to think about and continually develop and promote new stories and narratives that we basically that are rooted in evidence or science or experience that you may have in that sense, that support a sense of meaning, purpose, and hope. And so then, that means that we want to use in some ways, simple ways that support ways to calm our body and our emotions and behaviors in the midst of stresses and adversities. So basically, we want to make sure that we are understanding some of the possible triggers that folks have, and we want to be able to speak to those and create an environment where we can let go of those, and then also continue to practice these resiliency pauses that build those skills. We want to help others do the same, hence the sharing of these skills that helps co-regulating. It might sound really tacky, right? That we say, go and share what you learned. It's not like that. It changes that simple in many ways. And it really, we are the vehicles to pass along some very important information. And so here also use climate and other adversities as transformational catalysts to help others increase their well-being and regenerate the natural environment to increase their sense of well-being. So here's we can look at adversities and say, what are we learning from this together so that we can make that better? So here you can just see basically how that is. So let's say we stay dysregulated when there's an event that occurs, and then, that basically leads to no improvement. But when we have a recovery or even the opportunity for growth, which means that we have applied some of these transformational resilience practices, where we're acknowledging adversities and trauma, and we're then saying, what can we learn from that and how can we make it better? How can I help you heal and grow? That's sort of this perspective. And so again, there is no community resilience without human, social, psychological, and emotional resilience. This is a slide that was repeated from the last time. And so we really want to be engaged in this process of reducing, addressing basically this, population level mental wellness and regenerative well-being. And so I want to use the last 10 minutes of today to have some small group discussions. So what I will do is I will put you in a small pair, in pairs, and I'd like you each to take about 3 minutes to talk about, your list. Who did you come up with? And then what may be 3 action steps that you want to take or that you're ready to take, right? So think about the list of people that you made and action steps that came along. And I am going to put you into groups of 2. And then you have a chance to chat real quick. Okay, so there'll be one group with 3. So please share the microphone as always, with some equal time. I will call you back in 6 minutes. And then, so that's 2 minutes, 6 minutes, and then we'll have a round out together. So here are the groups, and here you go. I'm going to pause the recording. Wonderful, you made it all back. Lovely to see you. So I am so curious to hear if you want to or willing to share for the last few minutes, some of what you discussed. What came up for you? How was it?
It went so quick that we didn't get very far. But we did have a lovely conversation, and
built
So-
community amongst the three of us.
Yes.
I appreciated during my conversation with Olivia, I was thinking very much like, who do I need to reach out close by? Like the public health director and the NAMI executive director and the, you know, commissioner of human health and human services. And she then said, well, I'm going to reach out to my friend who's working in public health in Boston and this person and that person from like, you know, looking at it more of who are the people who are going to help me do this work. I might be off on this, Olivia, but I felt like you took it differently. And I went, wow, I have friends doing public health work in other places and getting outside influence and ideas and thoughts as, you know, we're looking to do this or we're looking to have this discussion makes a great deal of sense.
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of that, I feel like I'm coming from the place of seeing building external community, starting with building your own community within like your most personal and intimate spaces. And this kind of touches upon a webinar that I went to yesterday. It was for part of the building whole human and something, one of those series workshops, which was really great. And we talked about equity and how do you practice equity externally. And I feel like I see it very, very similarly in terms of these things aren't really being done in the way that we need to if we're not embodying them within our most personal, you know, and intimate relationships. And I feel like that's how I view building community. We had a good conversation about it, so of course can't mention everything, but just piggybacking off of that. And it was nice to speak to you, Amanda.
Nice to meet you too, Olivia.
Yeah, very lovely. It sounds like you all had some great conversation. At least, I hope that it started some sparks, you know, in your brain or mind about how you may want to continue and or what maybe some steps that you can do and you inspire each other. And so I really encourage you to continue to cultivate those and think about ways that you may want to or can, you know, really respond to that. So I just want to go back one more time to this presentation here because time always does fly way faster than we think. So, you know, the goal for today is really that we shift towards communities that are resilience enhancing. And we start with organizing small groups, whether it's at a local or more of a global scale. That's really up to you. There is no right or wrong, remember? Use your elevator speech. It doesn't have to be perfect. Practice it, make it better or more succinct, whatever works. And then take time to learn and practice good communication and conflict resolution skills. These are also part of that. That's really talking about this myth. How do we demystify basically some of the changes or the possibility for change, which is where we often have these mental barriers. And how do we speak and communicate in a way that it can reach people as opposed to in their ways of being able to be open as opposed to being triggered to feeling that this is not possible, right? So thinking about our nervous systems and ways that we can make these real connections. And the beautiful thing is that like in co-regulation, it always comes back. There's always this connection that then that ends up filling us up as well. So here's a QR code. I would love to for you to scan it in to provide some brief feedback on this session. We always want to make it better. You can totally stay anonymous. And this way we are sure that we can, you know, make this work for you all. And then we have another minute for in case you have questions or anything else that you want to bring up.
Can you put the QR code back up for one quick second?
Yes, absolutely. I
I
know
wasn't.
sometimes it goes so fast, right? Yeah. Here we go.
There we go. Got it.
Okay. Yes,